In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint Vi from Arcane. Nothing fancy, just a good old-fashioned painting tutorial. Hi, my name's Matt, and welcome to my channel. So, just a very quick note that the face will not be shown in this video as there's already a dedicated tutorial for this. So I start with the coat. We're going to work up from dark red all the way up to bright red. So you can see here, this is all going to be airbrushed to get a nice, easy, simple gradient. And I start with some burnt red from Vallejo. Moving on from this, I basically pick a mid-tone red and I just want to hit the top areas. Right now, I want to focus on just where the light source would be coming from. So I don't need to worry about shading the underside of the jacket because that's going to be hidden. Anywhere that's raised pretty much is going to get a mid-tone black. So with the mid-tone down, what I'm going to do now is a little trick where I put white ink over the top of that. Basically, this is the saturation point. I want to bump up the contrast just before I get to my highlights. And what happens is that the ink will bleed over a little bit, but that's okay because when we get to actually brush highlighting, it will look quite smooth and the highlights will give us the max contrast. So now I'm adding some red ink and this will just saturate everything back down. After the red ink, we'll apply some highlights. So with the jacket done, I'm going to do a quick and dirty kind of job on the skin. I start with AK's Beige Red, which is a really nice kind of standard skin tone to start with. adding some brown rose to the underside of the arms to give us a little bit of shading. Now you can add just a little bit of pink to your skin tone and this will have the same effect. For the highlights, you can see that I'm adding pale skin to our mid-tone mix, which just brightens up the contrast a little bit. And we only want to hit the areas on top where the light would be coming from. Now finally, just some pure pale flesh just to bump up the contrast. And once that is finished, that will be the skin. So the first thing I wanted to start with was the freehand tattoos. What I do is with my tattoos is I add a little bit of ink and some black just so that it flows nice and smooth. Now these aren't necessarily the canonical tattoos on Vi. I did manage to do those on a previous one, but you get the idea. Just rough shapes, keep them as tidy as you possibly can, and don't worry if you make mistakes because you can just add skin tones just to correct them. So you can see a few cogs, few wheels here and there, and we sell the idea of these tattoos. Now for some finer detail on the jackets, a little trick I like to do is I'm adding just some red contrast paint to the crevices just to get a little extra depth and separation on the jacket. So now we're moving on to the first highlight, which is just a 50-50 mix of a bright red and an orange. And all I'm doing is kind of stipple glazing to create some texture, and I'm only painting the creases on the jacket to create a little bit of realistic texture and just to kind of bring the jacket out a little bit more and give a little bit more depth to it. So here you can see there's obviously a little bit where the airbrush wasn't perfect, so I'm going in with some burnt red again just to fix it. So with the reds done, I move on to the inner part of the jacket. I'm using basically a navy. I had to kind of mix a lot of blues, desaturated with a bit of black, just to get the color that was roughly what's shown in the show. But again, this is quite simple. We're just going to be base coating in this navy to get an accurate color. And we're going to be doing this for all the sections on the jacket that are to be navy. And here's a quick speed up so that I don't bore you to tears. Now, moving on, again, in a similar process to how I did the highlights for the red, I'm kind of stipple glazing in just a lighter color. It's a little bit of an electric blue or just a very bright blue just for highlights. Now, we're moving on to the freehand shoulder patches. Now, because these are obviously going to be white, I undercoat them with grey, just so the white looks a little bit better when it goes down. And once again, I'm freehanding just with some loose fluid going paint. And I add some metallic silver paint for all the bits on the top. And then just a little bit of a highlight just to finish them off so that they shine a little bit brighter. Okay, so we're moving on to the purple parts. Again, I use quite a light kind of magenta. Violet red is the color I believe I'm using here. And I just want to color in all those bits that are purple. And then simply put, I just start stippling in some scratches of pink just for contrast, like on the jacket. So now I've moved on to the browns and I'm just undercoating with some dark brown. I actually follow Jose Da Vinci's leather guide mostly for my browns, or how I do leathers, because I actually find to get quite a nice result. So at each stage, I'm just going to be adding a little bit of lighter brown up to a point where I almost add sunny skin tone in, again using some stippling and some glazing to smooth the previous layers. You can see basically here, this is me again using some lighter browns just to really bump up the contrast on the belts. And lastly, I just want to add some metallics to the belt for a little bit of shine. Now, this part is probably the kind of boring part where the stripes in the pants. I just use some Rhinox hide for the darkest stripes. And then again, I kind of custom mix in some browns for the other stripes to get that contrast like you see on our pants in the show. So again, this was probably the most time-consuming part of the pants, but creating that two-tone effect really looks nice. And it's just about being smart with your brush, being controlled. So for the green parts, I, in a similar fashion to whites, undercoat with grey just so the colour goes down a little bit better. And now just for some variation in brown tones, for the little satchel on the side, I use Mornfang brown. Moving on to the laces and the trim of the boots, we have a lighter brown using a little bit of cork brown added into the light mix on the pants, just again to give us a different tone of brown. Nothing too fancy, just a good cork brown. Again, brush control is key here, but you don't have to worry about getting it too messy because you're going to be going over the mistakes you make with the different browns and blues from the shoes. So speaking of, I kind of go again for a much lighter navy this time for the boots. 2 thin coats to get coverage. Now, I like to stipple in a little bit of a lighter tone, and you'll see me rubbing the paint a lot with my thumb. It kind of gives a better texture, especially for roughed and dirtied boots. And then we're adding in just some dirt with some oranges and browns, just to sell the effect that these obviously have been worn in boots, and she's not exactly in the best of places, so these boots would be pretty dirty. And now for the final part on the body, we're just adding in some copper on the metallic bits on the boot. Once we've added them in, what we're going to do is give them a bit of a wash, and then we'll dirty them up. So, moving on to the gauntlets, I start by spraying some blue ink over silver to get that beautiful metallic blue. So the first step is the bottom half. We're just going to hand brush in some silvers. So from here on out, this is all just fine detail work. As you can see, probably, and my mistake, I really didn't like the first gold I put down because it just was not covering. So eventually I would go to Pro Acryl Bright Gold, but I think it's more on my fault for not putting in black over the areas that need to, because I don't think it flows well over the gold. But this is the last kind of step on Vi, so what you'll see here is this is just me now going to go through and paint all the trims in gold. Thanks for watching part 1, guys. You'll find the link to part 2 and the finished model here. Like, share, and subscribe.